Hey Jeff,
Hi Pete, how are you this evening?
I'm well. How are you?
Um, Doing all
Well,
right. Can't
good.
complain. Yeah,
Yeah, I like your backdrop.
thanks. Yeah, that actually was a picture from I got a little vacation in the middle of February. Literally, I got back. As I was flying back, all of this stuff was becoming more, concerning. And yeah, I went to Honduras and did some diving and
Oh wow.
one of the sunsets that was very nice.
Is that on the north coast? Is that of Honduras or is
Yeah, so it was actually one of the Bay Islands called. It's a
oh,
island called Roatan.
okay. Yeah.
So just a
I've,
really
I've heard
small
of it.
island that basically it's either tourism or diving are the two kind of main. There's some fishing that people do as well, but um,
Sounds pretty good.
yeah, wasn't too bad. Felt fortunate. We were originally planning for mid-March, and it was the rates were better in mid-February, and so when we booked it 6 months before all this stuff happened, I'm thankful we did because otherwise we would not have gone. So
Yeah, no kidding.
we
Glad you
would have
made
missed
it.
that window. Yeah, yep. So how
Um,
about you? How are you guys doing?
oh wow. Well, I've been working from home since March.
Yeah, me
I've been
too.
down to Oregon City twice, um, which is a little odd.
Yeah,
But the city is still staffing the counter, so
right,
we have shifts, two shifts. So we have two planners on at the office a day, but I'm still
right.
working from home. So
Nice. Yeah. I know that, I
it's
mean, I've
challenging.
done a lot
Hmm?
with the permitting group,
Oh, good.
inspections and stuff, and that's all gone really well for
Yeah,
our big solids
right,
project we have going on. So
right.
you'll be seeing some landscaping plans come for our mitigation landscaping come through here in probably in the next few weeks.
Okay,
So we're getting
cool,
getting ready to get moving on that and get all that planted next spring before we finish up our project. So
cool.
we got a lot of clearing to do. And that all the blue blackberries and some of the invasive species, we got to do a lot of that this fall.
I'll get on top of you, that's for sure.
Yes, yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So will I be sharing the presentation? I know I sent it to you, but will I be controlling it
You
or will
can
somebody
share
else
your
be?
screen if you
Okay,
want.
perfect.
I can probably give you permission.
Okay. Yeah, when it comes time, I just wanted to know if I
If you
needed to
prefer to
pull
do
it up.
that.
I
Yeah.
think it's a little bit easier. That way
Hmm.
you can sit back and relax and I can run the slides. So I'll get it opened up.
Okay. Hi, Chris. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Oh, good to
Hi,
see you.
Kim. I hear Kim's there too. Good to see
I've,
you guys.
I've already Zoomed 5 hours today. So
Oh, good Lord.
I had a
Oh,
Zoom meeting to learn how to teach face-to-face and remote at the same time, which we're
oh,
doing remote in a week and a half or face-to-face in a week and a half. And then we had the chairs retreat. So that was when I could turn my camera off and wander around because it was really boring. There were like about 10 minutes I really needed to listen to, and the rest was like,
Wow. Okay, Nancy. So you've had your full
I,
fill.
I'm already Zoomed out. So
You're zoomed out already.
I'm right there with you, Nancy.
good.
I've been living and breathing teleconferencing for the last 2 months. So yeah.
I've been doing it since March and started in the 24th, we're back face to face at Linfield, which I think is the dumbest thing ever. But I'm predicting a major outbreak in McMinnville by mid-September. And shortly by the school closing up again. But
My neighbor just got accepted in the nursing program at Linfield.
oh, good.
Yeah, she's excited.
Oh, they're going right to the Portland campus.
Yeah, yeah.
Good, good. That's excellent. I have more faith in what they're doing because at least there's nurses leading that program. So I'm hoping they're a little bit more
Yeah,
comfortable than the
she just graduated from Benson Polytech, so she's pretty stoked.
That's great. That's really good. Yeah, I don't know. I'm mostly going to do my classes remote, the lecture part, but I'm going to do the labs live because we're outside a lot of the time. So,
Yeah, yeah. Environmental science via the web.
well, and I've got one
Strange.
stuck in China.
Oh, wow.
Graduating this fall, and he went home. He went home for Chinese New Year's and in January and couldn't make it back. And he could make it back now, but he would have to go to another country, like a third country, for 15 days and quarantine there before the US would let him in. And he'd have to get a visa to go to that country. So not only the expense of going to another country and then here and staying in a hotel somewhere, but he also has to get a visa, which there just wasn't enough time to do it. So.
Oh, wow. That sounds horrible. Okay. Let's see. We're coming up 6:58. We are recording. Looks like. And
Hey, Pete, it looks like you're in a black hole.
kind of does, doesn't it?
With good lighting, though.
Very
I have
good
these.
on you.
I have these anti-glares. Okay, that's the alarm to tell me to record. Okay. Yeah, sorry about the reflective glasses. Okay, I guess we can say it started. Should we do a round of introductions?
Sure. You want me to call the meeting to order officially?
Let's do that.
I officially call this meeting to order on, this is April, I don't know.
April.
August.
August, April, geez, April 12th.
They're both A months. You get partial credit.
I've already Zoomed 5 hours today. I'm out of it, so. I guess I'll start. I'm Nancy Broshot, and I'm the chair of the Natural Resources Committee.
I'm Mike Hamilton, and I'm the vice chair of the Natural Resources Committee.
I'm Chris Weaver, and I'm on the Natural Resources Committee.
I'm Trent Warnes, and I'm also on the committee.
I'm Pete Walter. I'm staff liaison to the Natural Resources Committee, Oregon City Planning.
I'm Chris Story. I'm the Assistant Director of WES, and thank you for letting us join.
Welcome.
For the
Thank you
night.
for being here.
Yeah,
And
great.
I'm Jeff Stallard.
I'm Kim.
Go for it, Kim. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'm Kim Southworth, and my brother's here with me, Wayne Hall, and we're property owners.
And I'm Jeff Stallard, engineering supervisor for Water Environment Services, project manager for the Outfall project we're going to talk about this evening.
Anyone else? Devin?
Hey guys.
Devin
Sorry,
was-
I'm just joining. Are we doing introductions?
Yeah.
What's going on, guys? I'm Devin. Sorry, I'm a little bit late here. Was putting the baby to sleep. I'm part of the NRC committee.
Good to see you.
It's very clear audio, Devin.
Thank you. A little overkill over here.
Hey, Doug, we're doing introductions to kick off the meeting.
Anybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, Doug.
Anybody see me? Yeah. Hello.
Yeah.
There's the boss lady.
You want to
You want to
introduce?
introduce yourself, Doug?
Oh, I'm Doug Neely.
Okay.
Good.
Are we good? I don't know where Laura went to. She was there and now she's not.
Yeah. She'll be back.
Yeah.
Laura is the Community Development Director for Oregon City. So she'll be giving us a couple of presentations this evening. But to kick it off, we have a presentation from the staff at Tri-City Sewer Facility on their proposed recovery outfall project. So I am going to make sure that Jeff Stallard can give his own presentation. Are you able to do that, Jeff? make host. There
I
we
think
go.
so. Did that go?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Okay, now you're the host.
All right. And Chris is going to start us off here, and I will come in when we get to some of the routing study. Chris, if you want to kick it off.
Yes, good evening, everybody, and thank you. It's a joy to be with you virtually here and having a discussion. We appreciate your time in being able to talk about a project that we believe is very important to the community. This is the Tri-City Water Resource Recovery Facility, which often is referred to as the Tri-City Plant Outfall Project. So just to orient you, when we talk about Water Environment Services, or WES, we'll just use the acronym faster. WES is the regional wastewater and surface water provider. We provide sewer to Oregon City, and it is wholesale sewer in that the city maintains the pipes that are in your street, and then it flows down to the Tri-City plant, which is near the cove at the junction of 213 and 205. So every time you head south on 205, you drive right past the treatment plant. And that's the facility we're talking about today, but we wanted to orient you to know that the service area is a bit bigger than that. Just to give you a bit of context or history about why we're here and what this conversation is about, the current facility, the plant, was constructed in 1984. So it's not as old as me, but it's getting there. And it has been experiencing some challenges recently because of peak wet weather events, which is to say that the flows that normally show up there, we have no problem treating. But on occasion, there are heavy peak wet weather events, which is rainstorms in essence, and that can cause real challenges. And so what we are proposing to do is ensure that we can handle every drop of water that shows up at the treatment plant that is appropriately treated before it is discharged to the river. To do so, we want to make sure that we have a pipeline big enough to actually get the water to the river, which is an important component of being able to handle it. We have done some studies that looked at the alignment of that Jeff will get into, but basically our proposed path is to go along 205, underneath 99E, and then underneath John Storm Park to discharge to the Willamette River. The current outfall for the Tri-City plant also discharges to the Willamette River just north of that as it runs through Clackamas to orient you. The outfall, which because of its alignment is going underneath the park, actually requires a vote of approval of the city of Oregon City residents. That is because, as I'm sure you're keenly aware, any work done in a park that is not specifically recreationally related needs the approval of voters. And although we have our current plans is not to disturb in any way the park itself, will be fairways underneath it, that still requires a vote. So we wanted to let people know what we propose and to make us available to answer any questions you might have. What the proposed ballot measure will cover is basically the granting of an easement to go underneath the park for the construction and utilization of the pipe. Going forward for quite a while, this will become a new primary discharge point. It's actually in a better place in the river from a environmental benefit standpoint than our current outfall. And so we're actually looking forward to being able to utilize that to improve some fish beneficiary challenges that Jeff will talk about as well. Briefly, what is driving this is rainfall, infiltration, inflow, and Jeff is going to talk you through the study we've done that really highlights this challenge.
Sure. So in 2019, WES completed a collection system master plan. And so a collection system master plan really takes a look at your entire infrastructure, so the entire collection system, and has a very forward-looking approach. So we're modeling what we're anticipating flows will become in the future so that we can plan our capital projects appropriately. We don't want to build more than we have to, but we also want to make sure that we have the capacity needs when they're needed. So we use population growth models as well as rainfall models. The zoning for any undeveloped land is applied to develop those models. So what we found during that was that we have our collection system is old and aging, and we have many areas across our region that have excessive ion inflow and infiltration. And so inflow and infiltration is essentially water getting into our collection system that's not sanitary sewage. We have an obligation to treat anything that comes to our treatment plant and to our MPDS permit. And so the more water we take, the more we have to treat, the more costs are. So during the collection system master plan, these basins identified in red were identified to have excessive inflow and infiltration. So the inflow component of this would be inadvertently connecting stormwater catch basins or inadvertently connecting a downspouts from residential properties. Those are the kinds of things we consider inflow. And for the infiltration parts, it's really as groundwater rises, there's defects in our pipe over time. Sometimes tree roots can cause issues where they let water paths in. So that's the infiltration part. And so we looked at what we could do in these basins to reduce the I&I. And so I'll show the next slide here shows if we did nothing to do I&I except collect it and treat it at the plant. And I have a slide that shows if we address the I&I in these basins, kind of how much of an impact we can have on our flows and how that correlates to our outfall. So if we did nothing to our collection system, let it age the way it's aging and made no investments to try to reduce the inflow and infiltration that we know exists, by 2080, we would have to have a capacity for treatment at our treatment plant of around 400 million gallons a day. To put into perspective, we have roughly 70 million gallons a day of capacity today at our plant, so a significant increase. Now, if we go in and make investments as a region in our collection system to address this excessive I&I in those basins, we can reduce our peak wet weather flows to the plant down to roughly about 180 million gallons a day. So a significant decrease. And as part of the collection system master plan, they evaluated the overall costs, and the addressing the I&I and treating less flow at the treatment plant was found to be a much cheaper alternative. So with that in mind, we decided that we needed, or the collection system master plan identified that we needed to increase our capacity at the treatment plant. And one of the first things we need to do is get the ability to convey water from the plant out to the river to meet this 180 million gallon a day peak in the future. So in the fall of 29, as we were wrapping up the study, we hired Jacobs Engineering to help us do an alternative study. We knew we needed to get our outfall out to the Willamette River. And so just for everybody's knowledge, the Clackamas River is right next to us, but we cannot put an outfall into the Clackamas River. DEQ has a 3-basin rule that keeps us from being able to do that. So we broke the alignment to get from our plant out to the Willamette River into 3 segments. The diffuser siting was the first thing we really looked at, and that was to find the target. Where are we trying to get to in the river? To determine that, they looked at what the riverbed is made up of and how deep the river is. Those are really the 2 physical characteristics that we wanted to find. So we really want a deep spot in the river, and we want a spot in the river that has a very stable riverbed, so cobbles as opposed to silts and sands that move and change the bottom of the river regularly. What we want to avoid is our diffusers getting buried. That preliminary evaluation identified that just adjacent to John Storm Park, there's a very deep spot in the Willamette River there, and it's a very stable riverbed. So that was our target. And then we had to look at how do we get a pipe from our plant out to the river. We broke it into 2 segments to feed into that. And the first, we wanted to make sure that we coordinated with the Cove development. They were intending originally to break ground last year, and we needed to understand if we needed to potentially propose to have our pipe along their development. We needed to get out ahead of that. In the end, the 4 alternatives evaluated are shown on this map, and the proposed alignment is the magenta or purple line. That is along the old Agnes Avenue, for those of you familiar with that corridor. And that is Wes-owned property. The new Agnes will replace the old Agnes once that cove development gets fulfilled. The second segment we looked at was how do we get from that Main Street roundabout area out to adjacent to the river next to John Storm Park. The three options that were really looked at closely are shown on this map. The magenta option had significant extra length, which really increased our pipe size requirements to get the hydraulic capacity we needed. And so the proposed alignment is the orange alignment. We've been working closely with ODOT as part of this evaluation, trying to make sure we understand what the I-205 Abernathy Bridge expansion, how that would impact our project in the future, and how we could coordinate with them on that. The next slide shows we had actually evaluated and worked with ODOT to see if we could actually build our outfall, this last portion of our outfall, with the I-205 Abernathy Bridge expansion. We wanted to approach that thinking that it might minimize the impacts to the public. We could have one construction project in the area as opposed to one and then a few years later another one. Unfortunately, ODOT does not have a finite schedule on their project, and so we really have a need to continue, and so we decided to come out on our own and then work through it. What we did develop with ODOT was an approach that allowed us to put a structure in the cloverleaf there for the I-205 interchange with 99. And that will become important here. I'll show you in the next slide kind of how we're looking at what this might look like in a profile view. So Highway 99 and the interchange has a significant amount of fill. So to dig through that fill to get down to the level our pipe would need to be at would be very challenging. And so we're looking at running a tunnel across. So we would build a tunnel shaft in the cloverleaf there, and we would tunnel out to the river. Our goal at this time is to have a wet recovery. So we could find an area in the underground geology that is suitable for tunneling, and we can tunnel all the way out to the river and pull the machine actually out of the river. The pipe would be cased, so the tunneling machine would pull the casing behind it, and then our pipe would get installed. We would then also look to use that tunneling shaft to tunnel back towards the treatment plant. This would get us underneath the 99E interchange and out to Main Street. It's a very tight corridor through there, and so tunneling is really a nice way to keep from disturbing and also, again, dealing with the fill in the area. In addition to these benefits, there is a high level of natural resources and heritage potential sites in these areas along the Clackamas and the Willamette there. And so avoiding digging through those areas and disturbing those artifacts and heritage potential is a very big benefit as well to performing the tunneling. I have a little bit more on some of the work we've done working with the Grand Ronde Tribe and National Historic Preservation, the SHPO. Later in the presentation, we'll get into a few details on that. So what does the outfall look like in the river? The pipe that we're looking at building is a 90-inch diameter pipe, so 7.5 feet diameter pipe. The pipe itself is actually buried under the river, and what comes up into the flow stream of the river are diffuser ports. In this instance, we're anticipating approximately 20, and it's a big tide flex valve. It's a valve the consistency of a car tire, and it creates a spray into the river. The goal is really to have our wastewater, our treated effluent, mix with the river very quickly, which is why being deep in the river helps, and creating this spray as opposed to a solid stream out into the river really makes incorporation of our treated effluent into the river. It blends much better when you use this approach. So as Chris mentioned, we have an existing outfall. It's a 72-inch diameter outfall, and that's the gray dashed line on this picture. Our proposed alignment for our additional outfall is the green dashed line on this image. We will keep both outfalls. We would keep the existing one as a redundant outfall, but also gives us the capacity we need for peak wet weather. Our new outfall, or proposed outfall, would act as our main outfall. It's in a, as Chris mentioned again, it's in a deeper spot in the river that allows better mixing, and overall would be an improvement to the mixing we currently have at our existing outfall. So we're working to finalize the size of our pipe, 90-inch diameter, and we're looking at a fiberglass pipe. We've dove into the permitting. We are looking at over 30 permits to obtain to build the project, and that goes from federal all the way to local, including Army Corps of Engineers, Coast Guard, Oregon DEQ, you name it, we probably need that permit. We're expecting the permitting window to take over 2 years to develop the design far enough and then go and apply all the permits. That'll take about a 2-year window to get the permitting approval before we could really start construction. We're going to continue to engage community stakeholders and get word out about this exciting project. And as Chris mentioned, the first thing we have coming up here in November is we're on the Oregon City ballot measure for a public vote to get approval to cross the park for the Oregon City Code. So one thing I know that has some sensitivity, as I mentioned before, is archaeology. We're very sensitive to it, and I know the Grand Ronde tribe now has the Blue Heron site, and so they're our neighbors, and we hope to have a great relationship with them. So we've really gone steps further than the normal process to engage the tribe to work through our project and let them provide feedback and have input. Typically you would do a bunch of work up front and then submit something to SHPO, and that would kick off the discussion with the tribes. We reached out separately and have met with the Grand Ronde tribe. We've done a site tour of the alignment with them. We've allowed them to look at our archaeology report. And this is all in advance of really getting into the normal permitting process, which we expect to kick off upon once the results of the vote are revealed in November. But we're really taking it very seriously. It's important to us to make sure that we are good to our community and also good to our neighbors. But it's a rigorous process. Again, there's 3 steps, and we're just finishing up step 1 right now as it stands. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris. He's got a couple of slides, and we'll talk about the John Storm Park.
I do, and thank you. And I recognize everybody, this is something we find fascinating, and you may be wondering, why do we care about this and why are they in front of us? Just try and give that high-level pitch. The reason why we're talking about infiltration and inflow is that it is better to let rainwater and groundwater be natural than stick it in a pipe. We don't want to stick it in a pipe and convey it to the wastewater treatment plant where, pursuant to our mission as a clean water agency and under the Clean Water Act, any drop of water that shows up at the treatment plant, we treat as if it's sewage, even though we certainly know it during peak wet weather events that it's almost certainly rainwater. There's no real way to distinguish, so we take it very seriously, which means we spend a lot of energy and effort to make sure that it's clean. And the effluent that comes out of the treatment plant is cleaner than the river in many cases. So it's not a bad thing, but it's not an ideal thing. It's an intervention in the natural system. But even with that effort to minimize the additions of rainwater and groundwater to our system, there's still going to be those peak wet weather moments because, I know this may come as a surprise, but it rains a lot in Oregon. So because that happens, we need to design a system that can handle what the world may throw at us, especially given the opportunities for changing climate. So we are trying to plan ahead and make sure that we can provide the infrastructure necessary to support whatever may come over the next 40 plus years. But that new alignment that we're talking about is the optimal environmental configuration. We've minimized this a bit, but it actually improves fish passage impacts. Our current outfall is a bit closer to the mouth of the Clackamas River, and right now that is one of the key cold water refugia for salmonoid migrations. So we are moving our discharge away from that so that the fish have a less potentially disturbed experience. But being mindful of all that and why it's important, we also want to be mindful of the concerns that the community may have, particularly the impact that we might have on Oregon City and John Storm Park. So part of our commitment to the community, and I'll say our community in part because I live here in Oregon City, is that we will, in addition to make sure that we are respectful of what may be there, as the archaeological survey indicated, that we want to leave it better than we found it. So part of our commitment to the city of Oregon City has been to not only restore it to its original condition, but to make a contribution of $200,000 to the city that will then be programmed for improvements at John Storm Park. Part of that recommendation for how that money is used is right there on the slide. I won't bother reading it to you, but that's part of our philosophy and commitment for this critical infrastructure. As far as engagement, we're often asked, why are you talking to us? And the answer is, we want to talk to key members of the community to make sure that they understand why we're proposing this and why it's showing up on the ballot, so that if members of the community ask you questions, you are able to inform them, because we can't reach everybody. But we're sure going to try. We have a lot of outreach and engagement efforts planned, and frankly, it's a lot different than what we originally thought back in February. I think we can all understand why. But we are going to have some walking tours, some opportunity to go down and see the site. We are engaging folks, Zoom or otherwise, and we'll be holding 2 online open houses that will allow folks to take a look and ask questions and just engage at the level that they want to. All that is sort of pointing towards making sure there's enough information for people to make an informed choice on November 3rd. When that takes place, if it passes, construction will probably take another couple of years. Jeff is looking forward to having this project in his portfolio through about 2024. And if it does not, we'll have to step back and think of an alternative or ask again in a way that perhaps is more consistent with the information that the voters of Oregon City need. So with all that, we are happy to take any questions you might have around this project or otherwise. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Kim Southworth. I don't live around there, but we have a fairly new sewage plant. Is that correct?
1984, so it's certainly new-ish compared to what was before. The city of Oregon City had a wastewater treatment plant there that is about where the McDonald's is, across from Oregon City Shopping Center. That was there in the 60s and 70s.
There was an expansion completed
Yes.
on the treatment plant in 2012-ish time period that was brought online. So the plant was expanded, but it wasn't a brand new treatment plant, just an expansion of what was already there.
Okay, but what you're talking about at this point is just the pipe system to move the treated water out to the river.
That's correct, yes.
Is there any way that you could get any federal funds?
Oh, believe me, we've tried. You know, the funny thing is, and this is an interesting challenge that we're experiencing just as an industry, when the wastewater treatment plants were constructed in the 70s and 80s, we were able to get around 75% of the cost paid through grants by the federal government. And that has all completely evaporated. We are now 100% local funded for any infrastructure, which means in some ways, even asset replacement, which is the majority of our capital program, can be very expensive. There are some federal loan programs that we can try and access, but it's a loan, not a grant.
This is Doug Neely. This is at least the 3rd time I've heard the presentation.
Thanks, Doug, for sitting through it again.
No, it's all right because then I have the opportunity to think of a few things. I presume normally the temperature of the water mixing into the Willamette River is usually warmer than the Willamette itself. Is that true?
Yeah, so I did. So I think you might have asked this question before. Or I've gotten this question before, and our discharge to the river is generally within 1 degree of the river. So in the winter months, the water coming to our plant is colder, and the river is colder, and in the summer months, the water coming to our plant is warmer. But we're generally within about 1 degree Celsius.
Yeah.
All that stuff's monitored in Celsius, but we're within about 1 degree of the river temperature.
Yeah, the question I asked last time was whether the temperature you will have in the future is the same as what you had in the past. And you indicated the temperature going out is probably not any different.
That's correct. And historical, what we've seen, yeah.
The concern, of course, is the effect on fish.
Yep.
But there's so many things affecting the Willamette anyway. It becomes lethal to salmonids in the hotter part of the summer anyway. And of course, the Clackamas River does serve as a refuge. If water is coming out of there, is usually quite a bit colder. And I'm glad to see your proposed system. I guess is further upstream.
That's correct.
Yeah, which is good. I've got a question that's when we're talking about city utilities, they don't have to go to the rates don't have to go to a vote of the people. Excuse me. You're going to increase the rate, though, I presume. It's going to be a bond, right?
Well, actually, this capital project, we've anticipated it for a little while. It is built into our rate structure, so we are not talking about having a major rate increase to support this project. It's already fully funded.
So essentially, the money is essentially there, and it's a case of you getting permission to float a bond.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
There's no money asked as part of this ballot measure.
Okay.
Just one more thing. When we talk about we think about a 90-inch diameter pipe and 100 million gallons a day of flow. It's a lot, but we average less. Our contribution to the Willamette River, the flow we're putting out is less than 1% of the normal flow of the river. So our flows go up and down with seasonal changes similar to the Willamette, and we're generally discharging. Our flow makes up less than 1% of the flow in the river. So we're a very small part of the river flow.
I have a question about, I know you talked about the Abernathy Bridge project that's coming too. And they were doing something at John Storm Park. And so I think my only concern right now is they were talking about, taking trees out and stuff for their project and then replanting them. And it's like, if you plant trees and then they come in and rip the trees out and replant them again, it seems like maybe not the best thing to do. I don't know if your trees have to be planted right,
I won't. I guess I could just speak from my perspective. Oregon City would be the kind of the approver of any mitigation plans and those types of things, and having them be privy to both plans and our coordination efforts to date with ODOT, we can make sure as we continue to coordinate with them, make sure that we're not doing the same thing from a mitigation standpoint to any impacts we might have to the park. So that's a good point, though, that we something to keep in my mind to make sure I'm coordinating even to those things with ODOT. So thanks for that suggestion. I appreciate that.
I have a question for you. I'm Mike Hamilton. You're increasing the capacity of the system. Is the technology that goes into the actual mitigation of these flood events or high water events that impact the system, is that going to improve with the changes you guys are proposing? Or is it mainly the output side of the system?
Nope. Those basins identified, the red basins on the map that was earlier in the presentation. We are working with our member communities. That's Oregon City, Westland, Gladstone. We all have kind of basins where we need to tighten them up, and so we're making, as a group, we're working together to make those investments to address the I&I so that we can really minimize the amount of groundwater and rainwater we're sending to our treatment plant. So it's a two-pronged approach. The size of the outfall is set, assuming we're addressing the excessive I&I in those basins. And so if we are not able to address it, then we'd have to increase our investments in other areas in the collection system to get the flows down to meet the sizing that we're doing on our infrastructure at the treatment plant itself and outfall.
I'll add to that even with our reduction plan, which by the way is basically the most aggressive you can undertake for industry standards, which is to reduce it by about 65%, because water always finds a way, right?
Yeah.
Even with that, we are anticipating having to expand the treatment plant in the relatively near future to handle still some of those peak wet weather events. And to address your question, Mr. Hamilton, we would be adding additional technology of treatment to deal with that at the treatment plant to make sure that we are maintaining that high quality effluent even as the water flows may increase over time.
This is Doug Ely again. I'll throw you a bit of a curve. I presume that water could, I know it's a lot of water, but the potential of some of that water being used for irrigation purposes at the park, is that a possibility?
So as we work through design, so we do have at our treatment plant, we have a membrane bioreactor which produces Class A wastewater effluent, which is allowed to be used for irrigation. So that could be discussed with Oregon City for sure. We would love to find somebody to partner with to demonstrate that kind of reuse capabilities that we possess at our treatment plant for sure.
Indeed, the expansion that you referenced that occurred in 2012, we built out the system to be purple pipe ready. We have the pipes in the ground through about the fence line of the treatment plant. We've actually had conversations with the Cove developers to see if we could encourage or get them to agree to partner with us on the water reuse, because from our perspective, we are not a treatment plant, we are a resource recovery facility, which is why we use that phraseology. We create clean water, we create fertilizer, and we create energy. And that clean water is an asset to the community that we would encourage people to use water.
I have a suggestion not tied to your bonding project, but I think twice I've had the opportunity of visiting your expansion filtration system there, and it's really interesting. And I think maybe the Natural Resource Committee wouldn't mind having a field trip at one time to see the facility. I don't know if we've done it in the past, but we have in fact have several new members that have come on. I mean, there might be something a Parks and Recreation Committee might be interested in too.
Absolutely. I mean, we've definitely limited our tours in the COVID environment here recently, but historically I personally take a passion in showing people around our plant. It's an amazing facility, and I think that I think more people should know kind of what goes into treating the water when they flush their toilet. I think it's just a great opportunity to learn about kind of what it takes to put clean water back into the river. So
I'm going to ask you a question because it came up at the last commission meeting. Concern about wipes going into the sewer system. Does that affect your treatment facility? They may be talking about the transmission of the wastewater to your facility, but are you able to handle these wipes all right?
No is the answer to that. They definitely impact our facility a lot. More specifically, they impact our pump stations. The problem with the wipes, while they are flushable, they're actually made up of a lot of plastics, and they don't chop. And so our sewage pumps are made to chop the material up so that we can pass the solids and send it down our pipe. And what happens is they get real stringy and they create rag balls in our pumps, and it causes our field ops guys to have to go out, take a pump out of service. I've got pictures of our guys, shoulder deep into a pump pulling rags out. And so, yeah, no, wipes are are a bad word in my industry, for sure, in the wastewater industry.
You got to produce legislation that it says, doesn't say that they're flushable.
Yes, we've taken the run at the legislature several different times to try and say that's a bit of a misnomer. You can flush lots of things. That doesn't mean they should be flushable.
Yeah.
I would just like to add to Doug's suggestion that I, for one, would love to tour the facility, and I love the idea of opening it up to the public and making it as visible as possible. You know, the problem with this treatment infrastructure is that, you know, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. People don't really think of the impact that they have when they do things like, you know, use wipes. You know, it's all, you know, kind of anonymous and invisible. So anything we could do to bring it into just the eye of the public is great. I know there's a facility down in Wilsonville, a treatment facility there, the raw water facility, was just recently built an overlook at the river. They have decorative water features. They've turned, you know, what is an essential piece of infrastructure into, you know, a recreational facility. So I think anything we could do to push towards that just as a long-term goal would be a net positive for the city.
Mr. Weaver, we couldn't agree more, and thank you for saying that. And I will just aside from the Outfall project, this is just more general West observation. We agree completely, and frankly, we love to have people at the treatment plant. We bring about 300 to 400 students per year through and give them tours to talk about the natural processes that are there. And we invite in members of the public, but we always welcome more. And in fact, we have been partnering with the Energy Trust of Oregon and PGE to do some cogeneration investment at the plant, where we're able to strip off some of the methane gas that is generated from our digestion process to be reused as generating electricity. And as part of that, we actually submitted and were we were issued a grant to do an art project that sort of engages that idea of reuse and utilizing the natural resources that are part of our natural system here. So we're going to have an open house managed by, we actually partnering with Clackamas Community College to do an art project, and they're going to do sort of an engagement with the community. And then ultimately, it'll be something you should be able to see when you're turning on the 205, is an art project that tries to engage and educate the public about it.
That's fantastic. I wonder if there's anything we could do here to help spread the word on that for the open house.
I will happily pass along all the details of that open house to you. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Hi, this is Trent Warnes. I got a quick question. You mentioned earlier about being able to, some of the byproducts or the outproducts of the treatment is clean water. You mentioned fertilizer, I think it was. Do you guys have some sort of a fertilizer / biosolids program of trying to get rid of some of the solid materials that you guys do treat?
We do. In fact, it's one of our major efforts at the treatment plant, and some, you might frankly say, one of our cost drivers, because we generate around 16 to 17 tons a day that we end up hauling, and we take it out to farmers' fields. One of the challenges we have, because of the volume that we're generating, is that it overwhelms local farmer fields. They can't take that much, and it becomes very cost prohibitive to put a little bit on small fields, as they're kind of broken up here in the Willamette Valley. So we actually currently have a fleet of trucks, and we take at least one truck a day to Sherman County on the other side of the Cascades, where we're able to find some large hay fields or livestock wheat, where we apply those tons of about 32,000 pounds is what we haul per day out there. So quite a bit of volume, and it's certainly something that we're always mindful and looking at ways to do more efficiently.
Have you curious? Have you reached out to any timberland owners and tried to look at applying it in the woods at all?
We have, and we actually looked at a specialized spreader. The National Forest Service has tried that in some places. Unfortunately, where that tends to be more successful is forests that are a bit more diffuse, more further apart than the dense stands that we tend to have here in the Willamette Valley and the Cascade. It just, in some ways, it just doesn't become cost effective to do
Yeah.
that compared to the farm fields, but it's still expensive. So yeah, we're very open to ideas about the best way to handle it.
You may know it, but the largest private timber operation in the county is Port Blakely. Have you worked with them at all? They've just gotten some awards for their stewardship program.
Yes, and I mean, we've engaged with even county forestry, which maintains several thousand acres of forest land that they harvest on a rotational basis to support the county parks program. It is an option, and it's certainly people we talk to on occasion to sort of test the cost profile, because hauling it 160 miles away is not the ideal. But we're also mindful of our duty to our ratepayers to do the lowest cost option if we can. And so,
I got it.
Yeah,
Did you
real
say-
quick. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Well, I was just going to say to make sure. You said 32,000
pounds
what per day?
of biosolids, 32,000. Yeah,
Say it again.
32,000 pounds. That's our normal truckload of biosolids.
Yeah.
And that's actually the more efficient approach. I'll note that right now we don't have a dewatering facility at our Kellogg treatment plant in Milwaukee. It fills up about 9 tanker trucks full of digested biosolids that we then haul down to Oregon City and run through a centrifuge to remove the water before we haul it. You know, we're trying to improve the technology over time, and frankly, within the next few years, we're going to add a centrifuge in Milwaukee, but there's just an awful lot of volume. As Jeff was indicating, a lot of materials show up at the treatment plant, and we harvest it all.
Yeah, I know. I've actually had the opportunity to tour one of the King County plants up in Renton, and I actually worked for a company that we used to actually manage the tree farm that they used to apply biosolids to there in East King County too. So I know they've been able to do that, and it's been going on for a good 2 years or something. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we could, or if you guys could get on something like that too. So.
Was that poplar, Trent? Just out of curiosity, was it a poplar?
No,
farm?
it was
No.
a true West Side tree
Nice.
farm. Yeah, Doug fir and hemlock.
Because I know that I have seen that where they plant actual stands, but it's like row crops of trees, right? It's not a the pathways to deliver. That's what I've seen before.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, this one is it's a normal like I said, Western Washington.
Nice.
You manage tree farm, but yeah, it's not rows or anything like that, and it's up in the woods a little bit. So
very cool.
That sounds like an excuse for a field trip, Jeff.
Well, I know that King County and up there they do have a biosolids program, so they make Class A biosolids and allow it for the public to use. We make Class B biosolids, so it gets applied to non-human consumable crops. So it'd be hay and animal crops, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because they do have a fairly large Eastern Washington program too, where they are applying it to edible cropland. I think it has to be, there's something about it that there has to be some certain amount of distance that the wheat or whatever gets up above the ground level itself. But, yeah, I actually know got one of the project managers up there that does the biosolids. So.
Very cool.
Contact, let you know.
I've got another question. I know that when it was Tri-Cities, there used to be a citizen advisory group. You still have a citizens advisory group?
Oh, yes, we do. We have the West Advisory Committee now has 20 members, including a member from the Oregon City Commission. Each of the 6 cities that we serve has an elected official appointed there, but we also have a representative from environmental groups. The local watershed council has a member there, the home builders. We have people that are just ratepayers that are members to try and get that diverse opinion that gives us the feedback we need in making and formulating policy. They're online. We'll send you a link, Doug.
Well, send us all a link. I'm not interested in being on it, but we have some
That was going to be
expertise.
my next question.
We have some expertise here. So go ahead, I guess, send it through Pete Walter if you want to.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to be respectful of your group's time. Any other questions for us? It was a very good discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you very much for the opportunity to come in and tell you guys about our exciting project.
Thank you.
Pete, I'm going to stop sharing, so I'm going to give it back to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah,
Take care.
yep, absolutely. Thanks, Pete.
You'll have a great night.
You too, guys.
Okay, next item is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. I don't know if that we have anybody phoning in with that, so.
I wanted to just mention Water Environmental Services has created this great project on the Clackamas River to deal with the stormwater coming off the industrial area that's across the river from us. I had the opportunity to tour that facility, and many acres. Is a very well-designed facility to basically treat the stormwater before it goes into the Clackamas.
Okay. So if we don't have any other public comment, the next item up is the additional permitting and notification draft policy for city tree removal. I'm going to share my screen and run the slides, and Laura is going to give the presentation.
Actually, if it's not too much trouble, because I see Ms. Southworth is on the screen.
Do you want to switch things?
Switch them. And I'm
Sure.
not sure what which one that Samantha's here for, but if nobody's here for that one.
Okay, so this will be the Thimble Creek Upland Habitat Overlay District presentation. All right. One moment.
All right, Laura Turway. I serve Oregon City as our Community Development Director. Next slide, please. We're here to talk about the Thimble Creek Habitat, Upland Habitat Overlay District, which is a mouthful. So the purpose of this overlay district is to regulate trees themselves, not looking at understory and just sticking to the specific map of the overlay tree protection. Next slide. Thank you. So this map on the left is the original habitat map that was done some time ago with the Beaver Creek Road Concept Plan, what was called back then. And then the map on the right identified the couple of areas that had higher habitat potential. And as you know, the City Commission directed staff to work with the Natural Resources Committee in response to the NRC's request to look at regulations related to these areas 3 and 4, which were adjacent to other habitat areas. Next slide. Excuse me. I just wanted to review real quick some of our existing tree protection regulations that are in place. I want to acknowledge that the Thimble Creek Concept Plan and its associated zoning are now effective, and they've been applied to the properties since the last time we all met in person. So the city regulates or discourages removal of trees during land development process by requiring additional trees to be replanted in its place. And then within a subdivision, the original trees then get a covenant on there and have further protection throughout their lifespan. The properties that we're talking about in the overlay district, there's two main properties or 2 different property owners or groups of owners, and they're both now rezoned to be R5, which is a medium density residential zoning designation. So in these specific overlay districts, it's all residential. So we can think about development in terms of future subdivisions now. There is an overlay district that does encompass portions of the property. I'll show you a map in a second. And so basically what it says is you can't remove more than a quarter of the tree canopy on a property within the overlay district area. So of a property, the amount that's in the overlay district area, they don't want canopy removal more than 25%. And so there's some restrictions. The city is proposing to change some of these codes and some of those restrictions and actually broaden them a little bit more as well. And so in proposed code amendments that property owners should see a postcard in their mail coming out in the next couple weeks, they include applying that standard for for not allowing tree removal, not just in the sloped areas, but also in the buffer of the slope areas. So it would apply to everywhere in the overlay district, not just the part that's steep. So it would, in our case, increase the amount of tree protection in some of these areas that we're looking at today. Also, we have in our code density transfers for tree preservation. It's an option, not a requirement. And then people can opt in to do heritage trees as well. Next slide. So here's a map of the overlay. I turned it sideways because it's very long and hard to see on a screen. So you can see the blue area is our geologic hazards overlay district, which is the slope/landslide protection. So you can see that with the code amendment where they're applying the tree protection measures to the flatter parts, it will encompass a little bit more. Next slide. The only part that's not protected at all through that overlay is this little bit right there, which is on the Hall property. Next slide. We did a site visit, and I'm happy to hear everyone's thoughts on the site visit, but some questions came up about what does the county do for tree regulations, because the areas that we're regulating are jagged with the county on the other side of this imaginary line. And so they identified that they have tree protections 50 feet from Thimble Creek, and then also whatever is mapped on this habitat conservation area map. The interesting thing about the habitat conservation area map is it really doesn't map anything super close to where we're actually looking. You can see kind of where the triangular piece is towards the bottom of the screen. We were looking at a piece over there and interested in what its abutting regulations were in the county. There's really not a lot there. Next slide. Okay, so this, I wanted to debrief. Can you stop sharing the screen? I think I'm gonna ask for just some general observations from NRC from our site visit. Again, thank you for taking the time to go on site, and we sincerely thank our owners for also providing.
Are we on for that?
We lost you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I just was thanking property owners for allowing us on site and then escorting us around and being so graceful and thoughtful, and for donating golf carts for our tours as well so we could stay distanced. So first I was going to ask you about some general observations, and then I'm just going to tell you some of the other questions, but maybe we can go through them one by one. So after that, do we still want to regulate the trees? Should it be limited to certain species, sizes of trees, or locations? And then lastly, what do these regulations look like? Are we looking at mitigation if you remove a tree? Or are we looking at areas where people just don't build and then we allow greater density other places, or are there other options? So the first question for NRC is any general observations you had.
Well, it looked like the area in golf course had some very mature trees, whereas the other area we were looking at looks like maybe in the not distant future must have been logged because of the species composition, but I should ask Nancy that.
No, I actually agree, Doug. Some of the trees up in the golf course, and I got the the survey, but it's teeny tiny font that I can't read, and I only forgot it like 10 minutes before the meeting because I didn't see it attached before. It may have been there. I got so much on my plate right now. But I know that the big trees on the golf course, most of those were Doug fir. They'd all been tagged, and some of those were substantial in size, and I really would promote protecting those trees. Well, the first place we stopped, went downhill pretty fast, but all the trees that were down there, they were maybe 20, 30 years old. So we're not talking about an old forest. We're talking about regrowth from some logging that was done at some point not too long ago. And I didn't see anything of particular value once you got past those big trees. And the other property, I'm trying to remember whose property was what, but when we went through the hayfield and went to that property, that had some relatively higher diversity of trees than what I saw on the other one. But again, most of them were not that big. It looked like it had also at some point been logged in the past, not too long ago, maybe 30 years ago. So I don't know. And
We've never logged our property.
Okay.
We've never logged our property.
Okay. How long have you owned the property?
Oh my gosh. I've lived here since we were children.
Okay.
I mean, it's always,
My dad bought it in 58.
it's always been kind of a mixture of trees out there. But since my brother and I have been here, we've not logged it. He cleared brush, mainly blackberry bushes, which are invasive.
Yes.
But we've never hired anybody to go down there and log anything.
Right. There were mostly
Most
hardwood.
of the larger trees that are like 75 years old
Or the maples.
were like about as tall as you were when my old man bought it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there's some nice maples in there, big leaf maples.
Yeah.
There was I remember seeing a large cherry. Now I don't know where my notes are. I took notes when I was down there, but it had a higher diversity of trees. But again, the vast majority were hardwoods. They weren't coniferous trees. There were some coniferous trees in there, but.
What was the slope there? I wasn't on the tour, Nancy, so.
Right. Their property didn't have, it may have gotten steep further down. We didn't walk that far into it because, we had time constraints, and we walked in a little
The
bit.
easy slope, even on the neighbor's property.
Okay.
Okay.
You just have to be careful because it's so overgrown. And, when I was a kid, we used to go down there to the creek and fish, and it was a long walk on relatively flat, but it slowly did grade down to the creek where we fished. But I have not gone down there in my advanced age now.
I'm going to ask you, what did you catch?
Yeah.
I have,
Trout.
was it a trout?
Yeah. And there used to be beaver down there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing Kenny pointed that out to us, too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was more gradually. We just didn't have time to go very far down the slope. You could see where there were places where we could have gone further, but about the time we got into the woods, about 10 feet, everybody's going, no, we got to go back. So, we didn't get in very far, but there are some nice trees in there. They're not the size of the Doug firs that are up on the golf course that have been preserved already, but there were some nice maples and stuff. So
I've got a question on the golf course areas, and this is really probably for Laura. But the area, there are certain areas that they were pointing out there. There was a slope and there were flat areas. Those flat areas that were down there, are they potential for development? Is Laura with us?
Oh, can you hear me?
Did you hear what I asked?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry. This whole evening I've been dealing with audio problems. Yes, there is potential for development. There's limited development for slopes over 35%, where we don't want any development there. And then there is some development potential for 25 to 35%. It's also limited. So yeah, I could see there's some benches down low.
I'll tell you what my concern is, and I imagine in the process of getting the permits and so forth that you'll check this out. I always worry about flat areas like that being sags, and I don't want to see the forest edge apartment situation occur again. And so that's why I was wondering.
Yeah, they'll definitely have to do a geotech.
And I guess we lost you again.
Oh, if it is developed, they will definitely have to do a geotech. There's no landslides back there.
There are none, huh?
There are known. There is some landslides.
Oh, okay.
Back. Ancient landslides. I'm not sure what year.
Sorry, Doug, did you say sags?
Yeah, where instead of the lands sliding down the mountain, the whole thing drops. So you have a flat area that was a slide, but you had a drop. You had a drop in the overall topology. So the area is flat, and oftentimes those things get waterlogged.
Oh, okay.
And a good example, if you ever want to see one, is below the mausoleum in our cemetery. And you'll go down there and you'll see all these ponds.
Oh, okay. Yep. On the metro property?
On our property.
On the city property. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Metro has them on their land too, but our property is a good example of it.
Interesting. Thanks.
I was thinking, I think the whole idea was to have a corridor. You're mentioning whether you had mitigation where you had no development occur and the density transfers. If that is done, I would like to see the understory protected as well. But I don't know if that should be given a priority over having the actual connected corridor.
The direction from the blinders on the project were just to deal with trees and not that understory habitat. If the city commission wants to expand that, they can, but the direction thus far is just trees.
Yeah, no, but the question was, if you're going to actually have a place where no building can occur, then I would suggest to protect the understory as well. I'm not suggesting that's a good idea because I think we're interested in having a connecting corridor.
And a lot of the understory in some areas was invasive species.
Yeah, it was very disturbed.
Yeah, in other areas it was snowberry and Oregon grape and stuff. So it was a mix.
Yeah.
All right, the next question, just since we're going through this process, I want to check in. You recognize the city commission told us to do this project and we requested it, but now that we've been on site, do we still want to regulate these trees?
Part of my answer to that would be the adjacent property. When we made the original decision, we were looking at the fact that it was a contiguous forest from the edge of the trees on these properties all the way down to Thimble Creek, and that somehow I had it in my head, at least, that was protected property. And I'm not sure. I know the one property, apparently it's out of the urban growth boundary. It's not, it's zoned that it could be developed. And so, it kind of makes it less meaningful to preserve areas of forest if the property between that and the creek is going to be developed in the future or logged.
Sorry, I have a kid. I would say that overwhelmingly it will be protected, but there's probably going to be some bits of some homes and pieces of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the parts that are within the urban growth boundary are regulated under Title 3 or Title 13 of Metro, and the parts that are outside, we don't know. It might be timber overlay. It might be something else.
So if we move forward,
Oh, can't hear you again.
You have to lean forward. For whatever reason, when you sit back, we completely lose your.
hunch over, I'm gonna say. So if we want to still move forward with regulations on this, should it be limited to the certain species or a certain location or a certain size or combination thereof? You were talking about the bigger Doug firs, and it sounded like we're narrowing in more on some of the larger, older trees. What's the thought?
I would suggest, in terms of size, perhaps to look at what we have in terms of our heritage tree requirements. I mean, some trees are by nature smaller trees, but we've defined those in terms of a smaller diameter to maintain, and others are others. And that might form some kind of guide the dimensions that we have applied to our heritage trees. Because we do that by species or groups.
Heritage trees size does have a list of sizes for different species, and then it also says, I can't remember which is which, but basically all trees that are 20 inches and over are also eligible for heritage trees, and then it must be conifers are 18 inches and above.
That's right.
That were non-native species.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some really nice, just beside the Doug fir, there were also some fairly nice, large species of multiple different species up on the golf course. I was relatively impressed, and we were flying by them in our golf carts, and so I wasn't either an Alaska yellow cedar or a Port Orford cedar, and I couldn't tell at that fast of a pace. So, but it was along that edge where we're talking about protecting anyway.
All right, so mainly sticking towards the edge as well. Is there?
We lost you again.
Do we want to limit? So we talked about species and size associated with species. If it's eligible for heritage tree, is there certain locations that we want to remove from looking at, or should we continue to look at the whole corridor?
Mike, what were your impressions when we were out there?
Well, I thought the trees along the golf course portion were the best, and the habitat there was most interesting, even though it was narrower. And it really went down fast. So there was, and the golf course folks that talked to us mentioned that they had logged as recently as the 1990s. So, there's a certain amount of that going on. It's kind of hard to see the extent of it and how far they penetrated. But overall, I was impressed with the larger diameter trees in the first areas that we went to. I thought the lower area, it was interesting from a diversity standpoint, but, I agree with Nancy. It's everything's under 70 years old, roughly, and some pockets maybe even less, depending. It had a mixture of natives and a lot of non-native species too. So, so what occurs beyond that, if it's more continuous, then the comments that have already been made are, I think, important. But if you were like saying these trees and not these trees, sort of a, choice on the stand, I think that last area we looked at had the least interesting individual trees for protection, whereas the upper area certainly did. And I had a hard time reading the tree report as well on the golf course property, so it didn't print out readable for me because it was just too high res. So that would be.
I didn't get a chance to go on the tour, but I've been on the golf course many times. And I've been along the edges there a few times too. I guess it was either missed a meeting or forgot. So what are we looking at here? Are we looking at managing this because these trees in these areas are in the natural resource overlay district? or I guess I'm just looking for how are we looking at managing? I'm concerned about dictating how we can say what can and can't, or how we're looking at this from I'm assuming private property ownership look.
There are certain requirements, I think, in terms of upland areas that we have for some degree of protection, and I think it stems from that.
Okay.
And I don't think we've ever, well, Laura can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that we've ever regulated any upland area. Everything has been based upon geological hazards or slope. I don't think we've ever set up anything in terms of protecting upland ecosystems. Laura, am I right on that? Is this the first one?
Are correct that this is the first area that is outside the natural resource overlay. There is some, or most of it is in our geologic hazards overlay. The tree protections there, again, are just saying you can't cut more than 25% of the canopy within the overlay. And then the city is right now broadening that to include the flatter parts. So it actually is capturing most of this. I can bring up the map again, but you're right. Regulations of standalone trees that are not in historic district or any other type of environmental overlay. This is the first for upland habitat, or the only.
Trent, we were kind of looking at it as like we have these areas where there was forest that was already being protected, you know, to some extent because it was in the geological hazard zone. And these were areas that were adjacent to that would give a bigger contiguous forest before you got to Thimble Creek. So essentially have a more intact forest ecosystem, because as you chop the forest up, it ceases to become forest, you know, it starts functioning as edge. So the idea was to minimize the amount of edge habitat if we could. But again, you know, we were basing it on aerial photos from who knows when properties, which is why we went out and did the field trip to get an idea of what was actually out there.
Yeah, I believe Metro's habitat conservation area map, on which Metro Title 13, which is the NROD, was based, was a photograph that was taken in 2003 and combined with a lot of other analysis that the biologists put together at Metro in terms of patch size and contiguity of resources.
So the idea was if we set some of these areas aside for habitat protection or even tree protection, could we, you know, protect the trees, but then could we do a density shift so that, you know, they could still put in the same amount of housing projects, you know, make them have duplexes or triplexes or something rather than single family homes, without, you know, I don't want to hurt the property owners dramatically.
Well, and that's, I guess, what is the, I guess, Kim, are you the property owner? What's your thought on if we did protect more or took more away, or decided to protect more than what there was there?
I'm not sure I'm following you. Our position was that we felt that too much of the area was protected compared to the trees. My understanding, because when we attended the first meeting, you had a list of trees that were like your trees that you wanted to see, wanted to make sure were protected. And we feel, my brother and I feel, that our property, I mean, we don't mind having a strip along our property border with trees that, you know, are the type of trees or are trees that are valuable to keep and maintain. But ultimately, I mean, we don't have a buyer now, so you know, nobody's, you know, kind of interested in the property at this point. But we want to, we don't have a whole lot of residential area, and we would like to develop as much of it as we can. And if you just have like some kind of, you know, jungle out there I don't think that would be, very beneficial for the developer selling homes in the area. And, it might be a hazard for children and things back there. But I would like to see a strip along our border, and if there's specific trees that we want to keep there, and or plant other trees that the committee might recommend, so that we could create more of that area. But like I pointed out to one gentleman, that we have a neighbor on the other side of our border, and they've got property down there, and the guy shoots down there all the time. So we have a lot of people that have practiced their Second Amendment rights around us, across the street and down over the end of the Redland Valley there. And so I don't know.
To me, that's the most valuable piece of property we have.
Yeah.
As far as noise, and if like I talked to Laura, and I said, those trees have grown up so much that we've lost our view. But that's a view everybody can enjoy. Now, I emailed Laura a proposal. I don't know. I never got a response about it. But I'd like to hear from her.
Yeah, I have to sort of a side note, but one thing that really struck me when both speaking to you, Wayne and Kim, and then going on site and speaking with Rose and everybody else too, was how much you guys literally grew up on this land and are living on this land and connected to the land.
Yeah.
So yeah, you did ask me about some stream, so a bit of a separate issue, not related to the trees.
Well, yeah, it is, because that's the most beautiful forest we have down there.
By the spring, we have some very large trees.
A lot of marketable cedars, firs.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to come out and look.
Well, that would be quite a hike too.
Not really. You can drive right to it.
Well, no, you can't. I mean, I trucked down there. It could be you'd have to wear your hiking boots and everything.
No.
All right, let's not have a fight.
The directive of the city commission and of the natural resources committee was just to look at this one narrow area. And so, yeah, I was hesitant to look around at any other places that you can manage the other trees separately from this.
Is the area that
I was giving you an alternative.
is the area you're talking about with the spring and the big trees, is that part of this parcel of property?
Yes.
Is it
It's
on
property we own, but yeah.
But is it in part of what we've set aside?
No.
Well, at first, yeah.
Well, it's kind of. I don't know. It's on the Beaver Creek concept plan as being like a habitat area.
It's not in the blue.
headwaters of Thimble Creek.
It's not in the blue area, Laura. Is that correct?
My understanding, it's not.
No.
Wayne, it's more over towards your house, right?
No. It's not. It's closer to the high school.
To the west of my house.
There's a bunch of houses up in there, and then there's a stand of trees with a canyon in it.
And a spring.
And a spring, a year-round spring. And for some reason, somebody thought that was the trick, but it's a spring.
Do you want me to share my screen?
It's one of the other habitat areas that was numbered.
Did you get that up there?
It wasn't contiguous to the Thimble Creek, the main Thimble Creek. And so the
not to the property that we're just, that is in the, it's along the border.
I'm telling you, it's diverse. You could put those madrone trees in there and different experimental in different places, because my buddy has 5 of them. And the best one, the one that's the healthiest, grows out in the open.
I could say, for my money, I kind of had a hard time making this decision on the basis of what individual trees to preserve, because I think the decision is more kind of nuanced than that, especially if we're going for ecological diversity. I think the overall goals don't kind of mesh. That kind of paired with the fact that the initial kind of INROD district was just kind of based on aerial photography. It seemed to just kind of arbitrarily follow the tree line on the Southworth property. I've been trying to think of it in a different way. If we're thinking about this in vegetated corridors, the most important thing in my mind is the riparian areas. And if we look at the
northwest of the pipeline.
Okay, sir, but as far as the disputed areas are, but just talking about the area in question, it seemed like the majority of that area was nowhere near the actual body of Thimble Creek itself. I think that's worth looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's the best forest we own.
I know, sir. That's what I'm saying. In support of that, I think everything near the road, like in the northeast and northern edge of the property, that seems to me to maybe not have the most ecological value. And if I were to, open up any area that, we could just look at mitigation versus restriction, that's where I would look first.
I would think that's what's already protected in our overlays.
Right, exactly.
Oh, is it?
I think our original rationale was to explore ways that those areas could be added to, at least ecologically, in an ecological manner, to the existing protected areas, so that those protected areas have a buffer that prevents an edge from being pushed up against them and degrading what was already being protected. So that was difficult, I think, for the commission to convert into an enhancement to the regulations. And so we ended up with a tree focus. And trees by themselves aren't just the habitat. The habitat that we were writing about initially was, the biodiversity, not just the structure, which is the trees. So if we're backing off and we're saying which areas have the most value from just from a tree perspective, then our initial comments, I think, are valid, that the golf course portions contain trees that fit within our heritage tree guidelines. Many of them do. But the area on the southward property has much less of that.
Yeah, less
of those
I
values.
would agree.
So that's kind of where we're left right now, I think.
Yeah, and if the area behind that, when I was looking on the map that we had when we were on the golf course, it didn't look like that was protected a lot. There were like houses and stuff down there already. And so then you're not looking at a contiguous forest anymore. You're looking at something that's already fragmented. And if the zoning is such that it can be fragmented more, then there's not a lot of value in protecting those upland trees if somebody's gonna go down below and start cutting up and, putting houses in and stuff.
Yeah.
Can't hear you, Laura.
Can you put the PowerPoint on so we could look at some of those maps?
Yeah, I was actually pulling up our GIS map, which I think is really pretty interesting.
There's a slope overlay one in the PowerPoint as well.
Yeah, well, I've got that up on OC map. Can people see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so
That pink area in the upper left-hand side, that's where our spring is and where our largest trees are.
And our little mini canyon. And
right here.
And how you see it, you don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
And the farmer that uses our property, the cows drink water from the spring, so there's enough. He doesn't give them water when they're in that far, on a, between on Beaver Creek and Loader, that pasture there, because they go down to the spring. So, and cows are pretty destructive, but that is where we have, if you're talking about, a beautiful canopy
Or
with
trailhead.
with the tall, cedar and Douglas fir, and then the water goes through or under Loader Road and across to my neighbor's property, and they have cows, but there's that ravine all on their property, and there's trees on each side.
Right.
City,
But it's beautiful down there.
the city was thinking about regulating those trees as well, but because the other areas were contiguous to the larger forested area and then we sort of focused just over there on the tree line and didn't look any further at this area. But it is beautiful
Okay.
there.
Is that creek protected? It looks like there's a creek that's running through that area.
That's not a creek.
No,
That's not a creek.
it's not.
It would have been a stretch on the old laws to be a creek, and now it's probably illegal.
Yeah,
So
that's part of the
The
adopted map.
trailhead was
It may
supposed
not
to start.
It may not reflect what's out there today, but that's what's adopted on the city's NROD map. So
yeah, because so anything in the color areas has some environmental protection. We knew that there was some of that tree grove to the left that was outside the overlay and a little bit to the right too. And so the city felt that we protected most of those trees just through stream protection for whatever stream is still left.
That spring would be protected already. I'm
Yeah, but
assuming
I'd hope so.
you're on that little creek.
yes.
Okay.
What was I going to say? Yeah, so what you're seeing on the map here is the yellow overlay, which is the geologic hazard overlay, and the ribbon following the creek, which is a 60-foot wide buffer from this creek edge, as near as they can ascertain.
Okay.
And so those are protected under the geologic hazard overlay and the NROD, natural resource overlay. It's these areas that are outside of those, which are forested, which were the points of discussion, I believe, but we're also talking about these large mature trees in the golf course itself, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a map of it, Pete, too.
Yeah, I can switch over to that.
It's in OC map if you want to click on it, but either way is fine.
Which one?
You go under the concept plan tab.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well, turn
yellow is hazard.
geologic hazard.
Okay. Well, I have the photograph with the blue areas up on another screen, and I'm comparing them, and the geological hazard overlays those blue areas almost entirely, the middle and lower section.
Actually, Pete, can you just bring up the PowerPoint? I have one where they're
Yeah.
all on there. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah, so it's almost a vast majority of this is within the geologic hazards overlay. And again, as right now, if it's not real steep, if it's not above 25% slope, so move back or forward, I'm not sure which one. Yeah, if you want to scroll around there.
That might be about a 6% slope from behind our property, all the way down.
Man, tell me when to stop. We can't hear anybody.
Can you go back to 4, please? 3. There you go. So on the right is the map that shows all the overlays. The natural resource overlay district is purple. thing about this is the stream is so far away and that steep slope is so big. And so our natural resource overlay district maxed out in the middle of this, well, in part way up the steep slope. And so we have habitat protection associated with the stream, but it in no way covers the full slope. The full slope though is this yellow area, and that's in that's our geologic hazards overlay, which includes slopes over 25%, a 50-foot buffer from that, and then all historic landslides and a 200-foot buffer. So it's a lot bigger than the actual sloped areas. The problem that we have as of today is that if you wanted to cut a tree in the flat part above a slope, in this case, you could, and it wouldn't cause any problems with the overlay district. One of the proposed code amendments that's going to go before Planning Commission late next month is proposing to expand that to say that the flat part is counted in the calculation of limiting tree protection. So you can't cut more than a quarter of the canopy on a property in the overlay district as a whole, as opposed to cutting a quarter of the canopy in the sloped areas. So the only part that is not covered by the geologic hazards overlay is right next to the number 3 to the right. There's that darker yellow. That's the only part that doesn't count. And that was the part where what I heard from the Natural Resources Committee is not the ideal protection area.
And so the property to the right, like of number 3, there's that piece of property that goes down to the creek. So that's kind of a light yellow. So that's really not protected at all that we know of.
It's not
some other homeowner.
Yeah.
That's outside the EGB, right?
Yeah.
So it's
So that also calls into question, why would we preserve this if people are gonna, because it's not gonna be a contiguous forest to the creek. Somebody's gonna develop that or log it or
Well,
whatever.
I think it probably maybe state forest protection on that or something.
Well, we should check the zoning under Clackamas County and see what it falls under.
Yeah,
Pete,
'cause
can
if
you go to slide 7?
Okay.
But it's outside. It's
Oh, right,
outside.
this one. Sorry.
What, 6?
Nope, this one's right. Sorry.
We
Go ahead,
lost
Doug.
you.
Go ahead, Doug. Sorry.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, the city doesn't regulate that, but in terms of development, I'm not sure what could happen there. It's not selected for any urban expansion or anything of that nature.
Yeah, I
So
suspect.
I think its only value would probably be forest.
I suspect it's timber resource.
Yeah, I would too, and following state rules, you could still harvest a good portion of that.
Oregon Forest
Yeah.
Practices Act.
Yeah.
According to the county, they have a 50-foot buffer from Thimble Creek. And I'm unclear on if that includes the tributaries too. And then they have the habitat on this map, which it misses that triangle by the
Right.
by the golf course.
Yeah, it's like the other side of the creek.
I wouldn't trust those streamline polygons very
No.
much.
Yeah.
They seem to be way off. I mean, the top one
Rule of thumb.
should be
Oh,
over the, well, you can see the dense canopy area through it, which
Yeah.
obviously is,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it's not even in that. So
Yeah.
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Yes.
But you can also see there's already clearings.
Yes, and there's already clearing for the top third of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's his house down there.
Okay.
So I guess
Yeah.
I take back my focus on continuity, and that we're not going to really see any protection in the southwards property. by maintaining habitat in there, because it could potentially be completely isolated.
Yeah.
Except to the very top above it, there is that high HCA area, which looks like that's
But that's outside of our stuff.
it's not in Oregon City. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is the geologic hazards regulations where they're now going to regulate some of these trees in the flatter areas good enough, or do we need more?
My vote is that, yeah, I mean, the regulations that we already kind of have in place are good enough. I always have a hard time with trying to regulate that kind of for the first time, I guess, in the upland instance, to try to take away from a private landowner. So
I don't know that that's worth, keeping into the area that wouldn't be developed, to be honest. The big trees along the golf course, I think those are.
Yeah.
And
So,
maybe some of the other trees out in the golf course that we didn't look at that close, but not all of them, but
Talk to the golf course property owners to see if they want to voluntarily designate them as heritage trees or something, like maybe a slightly different mechanism to get some protection.
You're talking about the rows of trees?
yeah.
Yeah, the first stop on the tour, yeah, right by the golf course, those big Doug firs.
Yeah, the ones with the tree tags in them.
Yeah, Rose sounded like she was interested in keeping some of them anyway. So I don't know if she has any interest in wanting to designate it. So maybe there is no new overlay district, but we'd strengthen the geologic hazards regulations to protect those trees. And then if Rose wants to, or the golf course property wants to do specific special trees of protection, that might be a way.
Right. She said that some of them have bugs, and I didn't look at them close enough, but she said she's had people look at them, and some of them have insects and are going to have to come down anyway. So, we could protect the ones that were healthy. And so I think it would be good to talk to her and see if she would be willing to protect those trees, like do a heritage.
I have some marching orders here. I will do a little bit of work on our end, and then I'll probably come back to you guys next month. You're not free of me yet.
no worries.
Before you leave, Laura, I've got a question of the Southworths. That other creek where you had that tree stand, they think it's nicer, I guess.
Yeah,
Are they interested?
really
in
had fun down there as kids. It's beautiful down there. But of course it has to be replanted, because the cows pretty much eat the flora and fauna. But we get coyotes down there that they have their babies down there, and every time a fire engine goes by, all the little pups start howling. Yeah. So I mean, we have habitat. We have habitat that.
Yeah, we want to protect that area.
Yeah.
My question is, would you like to see that protected? My question is, would you like to see that protected instead of the other area we were looking at?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You have to come out and look at it.
Yeah.
We would really like to do something.
I figured it needs about 30 to 50 yards of topsoil, and then replant the ferns that were in there.
Laura, you were indicating that you were looking at that earlier. Maybe the focus ought to be on that piece.
Till you see it, you won't understand it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look its best right now, but yeah, it's a pretty little area.
Yeah, a big chunk of it looks like it's already protected. It's in the HCA.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it should be.
Yeah.
I could.
And the trees in there, some of the big trees should be protected. Some of them, I'm not an expert on trees, but we do have some beautiful trees down there.
I remember when we were looking at the other property, looking up, and I think Mike even pointed out that the big trees were further up the on the property.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wayne,
Oh, and we have big trees along the runway, but I don't know. They'll, you know what? I don't like to see any of our trees go, but you know.
perhaps I
That's
can
neither
talk
here
to
nor there.
you guys about designation of heritage trees in that area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, a list of the trees, and then we could look and see if we can identify any trees in the area. That would be really cool.
Mhm. Good.
That would.
I mean, I know what Douglas fir looks like, and I would have called John's Port Orford cedars just regular cedar trees or whatever they are.
Probably Western Reds.
There were some either Port Orford or Alaskan Yellow. I think they were Port Orfords. There were also that.
Yeah, that's what John told me they were Port Orford.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so I will work with both the property owners about designation of heritage trees.
Great.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again, Kim and Wayne. I really appreciate it. And then, yeah, I'll talk to you. I'll give you guys a call tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's come on your property and look around.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Am I still sharing screen?
All right.
Yes, you are.
Yep.
Okay.
Let me, you guys really get to zoom in on my face there. Okay, so next slide, please.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get the right zoom in here. Sorry.
No,
No
there
trees
is
there.
no
No
perfect. It
trees
just,
there.
Okay.
okay, so this is a separate project regarding city removal of city-owned trees. And so because some trees were removed at the pool property, we were directed to come up with an internal review process to go through when we remove trees to make sure that we consider alternatives and then notify the public when it made sense to do so or when necessary. Next slide. I just want to give a little bit of background on our 2019 statistics for the city. As we are Tree City USA, Pete does a great job every year wrangling how much money we spend on trees and how many trees we plant, prune, and remove. So as you can see on the screen, our total expenditure, which includes staff time, is shy of $500,000 last year for trees. We planted 628. Some of those plantings include plantings by Public Works and Parks, as well as our partnership with Friends of Trees. And we pruned 666 and removed 188. Next slide. Because of the trees that were removed, city manager directed us to work on this policy or code amendments, and it went to city commission, provided further direction to expand that to also include regulating trees on institutional properties, which is what this was the last time I saw you. And then we worked with you on this, and then went to planning commission and back to city commission. We talked to city commission again last night, and and a month ago. A month ago, they directed us to keep this narrowed in on city removal of city trees and not an expansion of tree regulations. I think the thought there was that we're going to pick up tree regulations in a more holistic manner once our comprehensive plan update is over. And then, so I'm talking to you guys tonight, and then I'll talk to PRAC later in the month as well. Next slide. So this policy is just for city staff removing city trees. It doesn't apply to public removal of street trees. It applies to trees both in city property as well as urban renewal property and those within the right of way, as long as we're doing it and we own the property. Next slide. So the list of, if there's trees that are eligible to be a heritage tree plus the Pacific Madrone, which was the recommendation from NRC, then that puts you into this policy. If the city is going to remove a tree that otherwise doesn't meet these standards, then they're not applicable to the policy. So they could continue their normal policy and procedures. Next slide. In this, we're not, sorry, as a side note, we're not changing our code. So we are not adding the Pacific Madrone to our heritage tree list at this time. Next time we open up the code though, we'll put it on the list, but it will still apply to city removals. So there was a list of exemptions, which included the habitat restoration areas that we had talked about in and abutting water quality facilities. And that was a request from Public Works. Nuisance plant lists or other invasive species around the region, as well as eminent hazard trees. For eminent hazard trees, those are the ones that are falling, have fallen, or about to fall within 72 hours, I believe it is. And so in those cases, they still have to document the tree removal and go through the process. They just don't need, they just get to remove it first because it would either maybe about to fall on the street and be a problem or something like that. So it's more of the process after the fact. And in that case, they don't need an arborist report because it would have already been documented and down or almost down. Next slide. So if the city comes across a tree that is eligible and not exempt, then the department that wants to remove it, again, Public Works or Parks, has to assemble documentation about where it is, how big it is, what species it is, why they're removing it, and what are some alternatives that they could do other than removing it. So they're going to assemble basically an application or an explanation of what they're doing and why. The thought process here is that we're putting pen to paper and we're describing what's happening so that we're forced to go through some alternative analysis. Next slide. That documentation goes to the department manager to review. And once it's done, then the department manager sends it out to a third-party reviewer. So there's two options for the third-party reviewer. One is a certified arborist. If the tree is over 50 or over DBH, then it has to go to a certified arborist. That arborist is going to review the tree, review the package of why it's being considered for removal, and then do their own analysis of alternatives, including the cost and the practicality of those alternatives. Sometimes you could save a tree and not remove it, but the alternative may be not feasible for some reason. And so we're documenting that. The other option, if it's under 50 inches DBH, is a staff assessment. And part of this was a way to just check each other as far as departments are concerned without getting an arborist involved. So perhaps a cheaper method if there's something that's easier or smaller. And in that case, we pulled together staff from Public Works, Parks, and Planning. And ideally, they would be people with knowledge of trees in some way. Clearly, we don't have a city arborist or forester. And so this is an attempt to gather as many people who do deal with trees on an everyday basis or have an educational background in it to have some input. And so those group of people will do the same thing. They will write a report up with the analysis of alternatives, including cost and practicality. And again, we're just making sure that there are other suggestions for things that we could do that the original department didn't think about. Next slide. So after they get that analysis, it goes back to the original department and they either then identify an alternative that works for them where they don't have to remove the tree, or they can choose to still move forward with the tree removal. One thing that we've talked about a lot, sort of a separate side note, is that I think there is a desire from the commission to retain trees as much as possible. So city staff considering more sidewalk grinding or things like that as alternatives to tree removals just generally is the direction that we've been given. So if the city still wants to move forward with tree removal, it meets the test of a heritage tree. They put together rationales why it got reviewed by a third party with another rationale as to if it's okay or what the suggestions for alternatives are. Then we are going to place all of that on a website and have a public notice period for 14 days. And the physical notice will be placed on the tree itself. The website's going to be set up similar to our land use notices, where if you want to receive an email every time we post on there, you can get that email list. And then in that process, people will get to see sort of the rationale as to why it's being removed and provide comment. If during this we receive comment or a lot of frustrations that are unanswered from neighbors or something like that, then ultimately it will go up to the city manager to decide if he still wants to move forward with the tree removal process or not. If there are no unresolved questions or concerns, then the city can move forward with removal. Next slide. And just, this is another layer in addition to all the permits that you already need to remove trees. You're going to need a permit to remove a tree if you're a city removing a tree in any instance, no matter what it is. So this is just more process and checks and balances along the way. Another checks and balances has to do with trees that are bigger than 50 dBH. And in those cases, we would do the public notice, but we would also put it on the city commission consent agenda so that they would have an opportunity to pull it from being removed or not. So it goes above the city manager at that point. And then we would send notice to NRC, PRAC, and TAC. I mean, the chances are not likely that it's in the right of way, but TAC is still going to be on all the notices just in case. So we want to make things consistent where you guys all get it no matter what. Next slide. And then we also heard from the commission some additional requirements, and that's these larger trees that are over 50 dBH shouldn't be allowed to pay a fee in lieu. We want to see the trees in the ground immediately, not go into a fund and then be planted as smaller trees wherever throughout the city when we get to spend those monies. We also heard a desire to reuse the wood if possible. It would be good if it was things that the public could use or the city could use. If the wood is free from infestation and equal to or larger than 25 inches dBH. So there's a recognition that we can't save all wood of all trees, and it might not be feasible to save all wood of all trees. But if it can be used for something, or if we can work with some woods crafts people who need wood or lumber to do art projects or projects generally, then we could build relationships with them to do that. In order to support all of this program, including the arborist reports, the noticing, particularly the alternatives analysis, and being actually able to implement the alternatives, we're going to need an annual budget. So part of the reason is a funding problem. Otherwise, we could save lots of trees. Some trees are much more expensive to save than others. And so having an actual dedicated budget, one to parks, one to public works, helps us. If we have no dedicated budget, this whole program is not that great. It's really just a notification process because we could not really do a lot of alternatives if there's no money to do it. And so in the next biennium budget, this would require a budget ask of some type. I don't know how much money that is. Speaking with the finance director, it sounds like $30,000 to each department, which is really not going to get you. It depends what that can get you. It's better than nothing, but that is definitely doable. As far as if we keep increasing the ask amount, I don't know. what the feasibility of getting that much money is, but at least 60 is fine. Next slide. I think that's the last one. Oh, yes. Okay. That's the last one. So this is I know we've given you different iterations of what this plan would look like. This iteration, it's just limited towards city removal of city trees, and it's designed to have multiple layers of checks and balances before a tree is removed, plus the public notice and city commission review in some cases, as well as the funding stream to complement it. Thoughts?
I have one question. Where did the 50-inch
Yeah.
deviation come from? 'Cause
I was
that's
curious. Yeah.
a huge tree, and I'm not sure there are any that big in Oregon City, or not very many.
It's rather arbitrary.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever we set the number at is, do you have a better suggestion for a number?
That just seems huge to me. I mean, that's over 4 feet in diameter, and I'm trying to think of the oak that was cut down at the swimming pool was nowhere near that big. You know, it was maybe 2 to 3 feet. So
Parks and Public Works seems to think that we do have a few. I don't know how many. I think the idea was to identify ones that are really, really big. If 50 is too big, what's the right number?
yeah.
Do we shoot too high there?
I think, to me, that's too high. I mean, I would say maybe 36.
Yeah, I was going to say 36. That's still a big tree, you know, and it's going to be a tall tree if it's a conifer, and have a lot of value.
Yeah, yeah.
It would be nice if we had an inventory so we knew how many trees we had that were that caliber.
That's a super good question.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 50 might be a bit big, but I think that's obviously meant to kind of target those really the big trees. Like, I mean, you can start getting in 36 inches, you can start getting like, there's a lot of trees around. And again, I'd be hesitant to make it too broad. So.
Right.
What do you think about 48, Trent?
48 would be fine. I mean, I was thinking in the 40s, probably would be fine. 42, 40, 42, somewhere in there. 45, I don't care.
So
40. I'll take 40.
You guys tell me. If you don't tell me, I'm taking the highest number you say.
I would go with 40. That would be okay.
So 40 would be the trigger for a certified arborist report as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We're happy with 40 then?
Yeah, I'll go with 40.
Yeah.
I've got a question too, and there's a second or third slide where you're talking about hazard trees removal. Could you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
It's very early on, maybe the second or third. Oh, go back there.
Okay.
That one.
Yes.
So these are the exemptions.
Did I tell you, or did I say earlier that the written policy that you got in your packet a week ago changed last night? The city commission did not want to exempt trees that were lifting sidewalks or walkways in excess of 1/4 of an inch or that weren't compliant with ADA. They wanted them to also go through this process.
My question is this. Disease trees are not necessarily hazardous trees in terms of them dropping limbs, but in some species I'd be concerned that if a tree is sufficiently diseased, it may spread its disease to neighboring trees of the same species.
Like elm?
And I don't see any call out for disease trees. Now, I'm going to kind of defer to Trent on that.
Let me think if the definition of a hazardous tree includes a tree that can harbor communicable diseases. That's in the code already as a definition, but linking this policy to that definition is, I think, what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, probably fine.
Okay, so specifically call out hazardous trees as well.
Hazardous or diseased as defined.
or diseased. Okay.
As designed.
Communicable disease.
Sorry, defined.
Yeah, make sure it's communicable. I mean, most trees have some disease.
Yeah.
If they're 40 inches, for sure.
And I mean, and really the communicable ones, I mean, like, what is it? The chestnut blight. I mean, most of those are already either dead or gone or anyway, so it's.
We do have elm trees and.
Yeah, the elm's got the thing too, yeah.
There's new ones though, you know.
Yeah.
There's some of the borers that are coming up from California. I mean, that are oak. And I don't know if they're hopping to other species. They're in black oaks though in California.
Yeah. The black oak blight.
And as climate changes, we're liable to get more of those things coming in. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right, so I will take the comments and then I will change the policy, and then I will go before PRAC, and I'm not sure if I'm going before TAC or not, but my goal is to end up back at City Commission with an resolution to adopt this policy. So it's a policy adoption by resolution. Should I just email it to you when I send it to them so you guys have a chance to know when it's coming, and if you want to comment on it, you can?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And sorry for the audio problems. I don't know what's going on.
That's okay. The meeting I had earlier was the same thing. So
I think I'm too zoomed out and teamed out today. So apparently it worked all day except for right now.
Thank you, Laura.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Laura.
And thanks for volunteering for NRC. I really appreciate it. And I really am thankful to have this group of people with this expertise is wonderful.
You guys are a huge help. So we only have one thing left on the agenda, which is the minutes. And then we can have member reports.
You guys review the minutes?
For what month or year?
January.
The only way I could review the minutes is to look at the tape. Video of the meeting. And I presume that's what you did in the minutes, right? You looked at the video.
That was still a live meeting. January, we were still live.
Yeah, that one, it has minutes. Were they not attached to the agenda?
Yeah, they were.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They were.
All right.
All as I was saying is my memory wouldn't go that way.
Oh, yeah. I do the same thing, Doug. Believe me. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought they looked fine. But
Yeah, I did too. I did a quick scan.
All right. Well, we can do a simple yay, nay vote if you want.
did the rest of you look at them though?
I did not.
I did not either.
I'm also no.
Okay, probably should hold off in the morning.
Okay, we can table them. That's totally fine.
It'll just
We
be
may
a
even
clear
have some
file.
more minutes by then. Who
So-
knows?
I know.
So real quick, just because I'm new and I'm doing a lot of listening while I'm kind of getting a feel for how the group runs, and also you guys have a lot of experience, and I don't want to talk when I don't have something that's really productive to add. But as far as like meeting minute review, I'm assuming that what that is it's just a typed out list of what was said, and then review purposes for us to verify that what was said matches what was actually talked about in the meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
Or, whether
And-
that's valid. And
Doug, you can check me on this, but I believe even if you were not at the meeting, you can vote on the minutes. I think,
I wouldn't, but I think it's possible, yes.
yeah. Assuming you didn't have a quorum to approve the minutes, right? So, yeah.
Laura says yes. Thumbs up.
or it says yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. Thank you.
yeah, you bet. All right. So that'll be on the next agenda. Any reports?
Don't have anything.
One thing that doesn't occur on the treaties list that they have here is that the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council gets $5,000 a year from Public Works for planting shade trees outside the city limits as part of their I forget what the permit is called, but it's their, something they have to show. And so there are actually city monies that are planting trees outside the city limits.
But that's for watershed enhancement, right?
Pardon?
That's for overall watershed enhancement. So
Yes, it is.
it indirectly benefits the city.
Yes, and the city has to show it's doing some shady projects, and so they do give us that money. So
Shady
what I'm
project.
saying is that's not on the list.
It's a shady deal, that's for sure.
That's not on the list of the trees the city planted that you saw earlier, but they are still being planted with city funds.
Okay.
Yeah. It's part of the shading requirements, which is part of the city stormwater permitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which we are part of Clackamas County's permit, so we have a part of that. Yeah. Anybody else?
Actually, as the NRC representative, comprehensive plan project advisory team, I got that acronym right? Can report that we had our first meeting, and yeah, things went pretty well. Yeah. The initial meeting was really just kind of a brainstorm of how we can actually get our voices out there and serve the underserved. Yeah, things are still kind of at a brainstorm level. I think I might be reaching out to the group just in trying to expand my own influence and my own voice and my own reach so that I can get to others, because I'm pretty much limited geographically. So I'm open to suggestions. Doesn't necessarily have to come right now. Reach out to me. Like if there's anybody that you know of, any kind of ad hoc community group that might want to be heard of or heard from. Yeah, now's the time.
Yeah, so I'll follow up on what Chris said. The meeting was basically to introduce everybody to each other. It's a 35-member project advisory team, so it was a big Zoom call, and we were focusing on initial outreach and trying to leverage the power of the project advisory team to make inroads into the community. So what we've done is develop a community conversation kit, which is basically like a meeting in a box that you can download from the city's project website. And I did a video, which needs to be redone because it's a bit clunky, but it's basically just explaining how to use that kit, how to go through it. It's a 14-page document. It takes about an hour to do one of these. So far, I've got about 6 people, I think, who've identified a group that they would like to do one with. I'll be publishing a link so that everybody can see in real time who's assigned to what community conversation. So we're hoping to get that up to 35 pretty quickly, and then expand as we go forward. That, along with the survey that we've got out there that we've been tweeting and talking about every week, which is now up to 650 responses. So we're doing pretty good on the survey.
We've already we don't take it again, right? Because I did it. And then
I don't think you can. I think it's by IP address. So.
Really? Okay, because I've got like 10 copies of it sent to me.
I've been getting blasted with it too.
Sorry about that. Have you been able to take it more than once?
Well, my concern was Pete's sending these things all the time. I thought we were being ID'd what we put out there, and the ones that were intended for people that didn't.
All I'm doing is what I'm trying to do is get people to go to the mailing list and sign up. Yeah. So I'm trying to expand the reach of the project website, and whenever you get something, if there's somebody that you know hasn't seen it, or just forward it along. That's all we're asking you to do, really. So I apologize if it's redundant, but it's going to continue to be redundant.
I just want to
well, by the time I got the 5th one from you, I decided I better fill it out.
Oh yeah, exactly. There you go.
So Thanks, we can use multiple different email addresses and send you a survey each time and really bias everything.
Well, we're not counting on it to be statistically valid. What we are planning to do is use keyword searches and categorize it to develop the themes that will go into the visioning process. So there will be a way for that to be very transparent. It's going to be huge. By the time we actually publish the results, it'll take a long time to comb through, but we can apply certain metrics to it to make it usable and categorize it. But in terms of statistical validity, there's a separate survey, the customer satisfaction survey that is put out by the city administrative office, the city hall. That's coming out later in the summer. And we were planning to tack on a couple of questions about the comprehensive plan to that, which would be a statistically valid survey. But it's going to deal with a whole bunch of other things, a whole bunch of other departments and other services as well. So anyway, without getting off topic, so project advisory team meetings, we are planning for them to be the last Wednesday of the month from here on out. That seems to fit with the majority of the advisory team members' schedules and not conflict with too many other city meetings.
Could you send out a list of the people that are on it, including who they are affiliated with?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right now on the website, it's just their position. So if they are advocating for a particular position or group, it doesn't necessarily say what organization they are with.
Oh, well, I see. So if I went to it, I would see the representative from the Traffic Advisory Board.
Yeah, well, there's an advisory board. All the standing advisory boards that are on the city are called out. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Sorry.
Yeah. And then we have a whole bunch of other people that are either, they have a day job or whatever, but they're advocating for a particular group of people like LGBTQ or people with disabilities, people in rental housing, large employer, small employer.
Yeah.
It's very well represented. It's on the website under the Get Involved tab. Yeah. All right. And that's all I have. So thanks, everybody. Is there any questions for me that I can answer? Okay.
We know where you work.
Yeah, okay. Laura, did you have anything to add? Okay. All right. Well, if that's it, then Nancy, you're in power.
I'm in power. Ooh. Okay, we're adjourned.
Okay.
Have a good month till I see you again. Unless I see Mike walking down the street all the time, but
Yeah, well, that happened.
All right. Good
Later,
night. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
Appreciate it.
All right. Good night.
See you guys.
Bye.